Today, as promised, we start Angular. In the previous lessons, we learned how to develop applications entirely on the server side, where pages are built dynamically with inserting data into HTML templates. After this, we discussed how to create data servers in terms of RESTful service that serve just pure data. We finished it not completely, but we've reached the point where we want to create some front end to connect to back end. Some topics were not covered for RESTful services. For example, how to code login, how to authenticate when we connect to get data or to change data. That will be covered when I will explain login from front-end side, so it will be a kind of connection in between, easier to follow. So this is the idea. So we're starting a new topic, Angular. I plan in the next week already talk about connection to web service, and so it will progress relatively quickly. A learning curve of Angular is not overwhelming, so you can handle it. You already know many programming languages, you can handle it. Our primary source of information for the second half of the course, it is this textbook that covers Spring Boot and Angular. I will use additional sources, and I will tell about them. But this will be primary source, like for true-false MCQ questions for final exam, theoretical part, and also for quiz. You will also have quiz. In addition to that, there are two reference sources that are very good, like TypeScript website itself. Angular is using TypeScript. It's not JavaScript, it is TypeScript. TypeScript is a language very similar to JavaScript, and it compiles to JavaScript. It provides some of type safety. It is not as type safe as Java or C#, but it provides at least some of type safety. References. When you go to TypeScript website, link it to Slate, click on doc, and first probably thing to look at a TypeScript for Java and C# programmers. You already know C#, you know some of Java, most of biggest part of the language. And this will be probably first thing to look at. They compare these languages to TypeScript where it is different. So there are differences, and it's important to be aware of them. Another source of information, like relatively short, directly to the point, it is this one, TypeScript Handbook. So it's like a brief introduction into TypeScript features, starting with very basic, and finishing like classes and modules with reference. Additional useful parts like topics that are not covered in handbook, like enumeration type and more advanced topics, and also in references there is a cheat sheets. Where is that? Somewhere. Where information about these languages are collected into some pages, a few pages. Oh, here it is. Okay, PDF pages, perhaps for people either to print out and look up, or just to have it handy as the files to open it. This is also useful. Okay, so here's about sources of information. And definitely another source of information, it is our lessons themselves, especially like lessons when we learn to create projects and deal with projects, because textbooks typically use various different approaches. So when you open one textbook, say do this to create project, another say something else, because people use different IDEs, so the approach is not the same. So what we're going to do today? In the first half of the lesson, I will do a quick overview of Angular, really quick. And after this, we will create simple project from scratch, like Hello World or Hello Sheridan project, and play with it to see what is inside of a project, how to add pieces to the project, and how to run it. This will be the first half of the lesson. And for the second half of the lesson, I plan to explain example, not typed from scratch in class, but I will explain how it was done. After first example, it will be clear how it was created. This is beyond elementary, but it's not complicated. It is something similar to dice roller example, except it is cards and it's only one card. It is not several dice, so in this sense it is simpler. But it is done in TypeScript language and in Angular, so please pay attention because it is probably first beyond elementary program in new language, new programming language, and different framework. I also posted another example, which is not complicated, but it looks large because it has multiple pages. This is the only complexity of this program is multiple pages. We will quickly cover it later, or either start this lesson if time allows, or we will cover this later. I don't plan to spend a lot of time because it is just project with a lot of pages, but primary reason for having it is to show how to make a project with multiple pages, how to link them. Because if you previously created some JavaScript program that turns pages, have pages, you probably realized that it's not that easy. It's not easy to create a program with several pages in JavaScript. So we use frameworks to code this thing, and Angular supports it really well. So let's start about quick introduction to Angular. In this course, we will use Angular for front end, and Spring Boot is used for back end. And Angular is not the only choice for front end. There are other popular choices. The most popular choice is actually React, not Angular. It's about twice more popular than Angular in terms of how many people code in React. I chose Angular for this project for several reasons. One, it is easier to learn after Spring Boot because it is similar structure. It's also easier to learn after Android. If you took Android, it has similar structure to Android GUI. And also, if you are in a mobile degree program has React course at the same time, so we shouldn't have a course covering exactly the same thing at the same time. If you are not in mobile degree program, I highly encourage you to study some of React, so it will give you a bigger picture. So knowledge of React is a great idea. Vue is far less popular than these two. So again, it's up to you, obviously. So there are popular frameworks, but the most popular is the three. So what is component-based design? Angular is using component-based design. Idea is quite old and it's used a lot, but it's not called component design everywhere. It is just because Angular has keyword component in it. We call it component-based design in Angular, but in some other framework it could be called differently. So when we have a program, not necessarily a web program, we deal with screens, with some items on the screen, we click on them and something happens. So we can separate a screen into some logical units, and if we associate layout with some code related to the layout, this will be component. And so if you took Android course, there is something similar to component exists, it is fragment. When we have a layout for the screen and some code attached to specifically piece of the screen, not entire screen, but specific piece of the screen. So in your frameworks for Android, there is a composable, which is quite similar. Some code describing a piece of the screen and some code that describes interaction with this piece of the screen. So it is not strictly Angular idea, but in Angular it's called component. Yeah, why not? And so, for example, and components are designed to be reusable. So if we have some layout, some code that describes layout, in Angular it is described in HTML. In some other framework could be something else. And But the idea is to have some reusable piece of code. In this case, it is probably some picture with name of the person, description, and this component can be used to describe, to display data about different people or books or whatever. So this is the idea. And I already said that it's not new and it's not web specific. Even in quite old API Windows forms, it is quite old. Our idea was present, some piece of the screen, some code associated with it. So when we deal with the components, we may use two approaches or mix of approaches. Bottom-up approach is to design smaller pieces and combine it into larger pieces. That would be bottom-up approach. For example, you design this piece, and after this, you combine it into a bigger piece, like comprising piece. Fine, as long as it works. There is another approach is to create another layout, make like empty pieces. Say this will be header, this will be something else, navigation bar, and after this, you refine it in order to add details into that pieces. So that will be top-down approach, or combination, or anything that works for you. Okay. So when we design top-down or bottom-up, we want to have very reusable pieces because, for example, here we have clearly one item is defined, is reused, right? With some data provided as parameters or provided as ID to get data from data server or whatever. And important part that when we have, so let's see, this is probably component for header, this is some other component, and bigger component that is list of albums or books, whatever, and there are individual items. I already mentioned that when we have a component, it is description of layout plus some code, and description of the layout also involves description of styles associated with layout. If it is HTML, styles will be CSS. If it is something else, styles will be some other styles files. In this case, when we deal with Angular, we have layouts described with HTML, and styles described with style sheets, CSS style sheet. In this example, we have a bigger component that contains smaller components in it. An important feature of style sheets for Angular associated with components that CSS associated with this component, everything that you define with CSS for some component does not propagate outside. So if you define background for this box, it will not change background of this box. So it will not propagate outside, and it will not propagate inside as well. So setting background for this box will have nothing to do with background of this box. So, and it is not a bug, it's a feature. Obviously, it is designed to avoid any kind of conflicts, unintentional editing, when you edit something here and get unexpected effect elsewhere in your code. So Angular is doing this with compilation. And it is renaming pieces specifically so you cannot hit the name by accident. So that was quick introduction about the idea of components and design. In today's example, first we create a program with just generated with one component. We may add two additional components to it, and it will be the end of the first half of the lesson. After this, we will discuss more with provided example. So, installations. Angular does require Node.js. You cannot create any Angular project without Node.js. So first thing that you need to do is to install Node.js if it's not installed on your laptop. If you're in mobile degree program and if you're already taking a web mobile programming course, you don't need to install Node.js because it was required for other software, for React it's also required. So how to install Node.js? You go to search bar and type Node. When you type Node to search bar, the first thing that comes up it is Node.js. When you click on this link, select long-time support version. Node.js versions change very often, extremely often. Like next month, it could be it could be different long-time support version. But if you install it this year, you're fine. They provide newer versions, but they're quite similar. So my advice, if you install it LTS version this year, you're fine. You don't need to install. Okay. But if you don't have it installed, please click on it and download it and install. Go with default, but at some point it will ask you, do you want to install compiler to compile some units? Don't, because we will not use it in the course. Compiler means compiler C++ code to have some native code compiled associated with Node.js. No. Okay? Just go with default without any compilers installed. Installation is extremely quick. It's probably like 2 minutes. Just click, and it's done. So this is the first thing that we need to install. It is a Node.js, and it's installed globally to your laptop. Next, when we go to, I already discussed the TypeScript website. If we go to Angular website, you will realize that there is also doc, and in doc this is also useful, like getting started and guides per topic and reference. Okay, so if you go to the top, getting started, there is a link called setup. If you click on setup, it says that install Angular CLI, do this in terminal. Open terminal and do it there. It is not required in your case. So where it is required? If you want to create project from scratch, using terminal, not IDE, you definitely need to install this into somewhere. So the terminal will know where these libraries live. Okay. If you want to create projects the same way as I do in class, using IDE, this is not required at all. So again, this is required only if you want to open terminal, type some commands to create MC project. Okay. So it's up to you. If you want to do that anyway, be aware that at some point it will kind of look like it's stuck, but it's not stuck. It's just doing something in the background. It will stay frozen like for several minutes, and after this, it woke up and say, done, install it. Okay? So if you want to go into that direction, just be aware that it will be frozen for several minutes, and after this, it will tell you it's done. Again, this part is not required. So this website is extremely useful in terms of looking up directly to the point what you need to find. Spend time browsing this website and TypeScript website. So if you want to find something later, you know about where to look for. Why it's called CLI? It's called CLI means Command Line Interface. I already mentioned that we will use IDE in order to deal with Angular projects. And it's true, IDE helps really a lot with Angular. There are two popular choices. One, it is what we're going to use in IntelliJ IDE Ultimate. Another popular choice, it is Visual Studio Code, also very popular with Angular. I decided to stick to the same IDE that we use it for Spring Boot, and it is the reason why. I want to use the same IDE, so we don't jump between different IDEs. And so this is my motivation. Otherwise, it doesn't matter for Angular. So why this command line interface? Because Whatever you use, either Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate, it doesn't have GUI options to add Angular component, add Angular service, add blah, blah, blah. We have to type it. So unfortunately, IDE doesn't have an options to add components, add services, add other things like modules. There are options to add files separately, but when you add components, you add 4 files at the same time, plus these files are linked elsewhere. They're linked to module. So the easiest way to deal with it is to type. And when we type things into terminal, we need to know what to type, obviously. It's not hard to remember, and it's not hard to look up. So where to find this information? Scrolling down, and there is going into references, and in references, there is reference to command line reference. So most of the time, we will use a command line in option generate to add classes, components, directive, enumerations, modules, services. Okay? So this is quite common, and we will start using this today to add components to the project. So this is probably the most we'll look at. Next, going back to creating project. These slides shows, by the way, since we have components inside of components, we can think about them as a tree. Right? We have a root component that is everything, and other items, kind of branches, and they may contain other components. Like this part, album listing, it is this one, contains 3 albums. So we can think of them as a tree, and tree has a root, key point. It's a root that is an entire piece. So when we create empty project will contain one component, which is root by default. Other components, it's your responsibility. It really depends on your design. But empty project will come with root component, and the root component will have some class associated with the component. It will have CSS and HTML. Okay. When we add additional component, it will come with own HTML, own class, and own CSS. Okay? You got the idea. So, if Angular project is created from scratch, it is not from IDE, but from typing. It will be ng new name of the app, routing, -s, -g, but it really depends if you want it. Okay? So let's discuss this part. Routing means, routing means that you want to have multiple pages in your app. Okay. Routing, it means going from one page to another page routing. Okay. So our first example will not contain routing for simplicity because I want just one page. So when we create project from scratch, we can add routing at the time of the creation of the project or later. So if you forgot to put routing when you create the project, fine, you can add it later, no big deal. It's another type, command to type at the bottom, so to add it. What is -s? By default, Angular project will keep adding files for automatic testing. If it bothers you, you can turn this feature off. So this is not turning on this, it is actually turning off. In my opinion, it doesn't bother me, so it keeps adding, I'll just keep ignoring them till the point when we learn how to deal with them. Okay? So I'm not turning off testing, it will just create these testing files, and later we will learn how to deal with them. Okay. -g is turning off integration with Git. but I do want to have integration with Git. So this is why I'm not using -G version. Integration with Git for Angular is different from integration with Git for, say, Spring Boot. In Spring Boot, if you put check mark when you create the project, integrate with Git, it will integrate project with Git automatically. But it will not make first commit. All commits are your responsibility. In Angular, it will not just create a project, link it to Git, it will also commit first code. Because first empty project is not really empty, it comes with some code. So it will make the first commit for you, and it will call initial commit. So this is the difference between commits in Spring Boot and commits with Angular. Angular will automatically commit your project when it's created. So this is the only thing that I wanted to show on these slides, and slides are done for now. So let's go to IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate and create project from scratch. I assume that you already installed it in Node.js. If you didn't install, please install it. Node.js, yes?
With the modules that you imported when creating the project, if you forget to add those commands, is it like a big hassle later on to, like for example, if you have to put in routing, is it like really complicated to add routing to an existing?
No, it's not. It's also one line to type and press enter.
Okay.
It's not. I did it. It's not complicated. I just don't remember this line, but you can always look up. It's so next. So let's go to IntelliJ, and at this moment I assume that you installed Node.js. Is it true? It's quick to install, so it shouldn't be a big deal. So new project as usual. When you create new project, Spring initializer was for Spring, right? So in your case, it is by default. So you need to switch to Angular CLI. Okay. So for Angular, it is Angular CLI. And then you need to select some folder where you want to create the project. And in your case, it is, I will keep it with. Then, when you type the name of the project, you see it will create a folder for it, right? So let's give it like hello Angular, hello Sheridan. And it is creating folder, hello Angular, in this folder what you selected. Okay. Next, keep note, it found installation of Node.js where you installed it. If it didn't, you need to browse it and find it. And this comes by default, so keep it as it is. And additional parameters, I'm not adding routing, and other things I just decided that not useful, okay? At this moment, I'm not adding -- routing because I want to keep it simple, one page. All right, questions? No? Now you click create and just wait. It will keep downloading some packages, some libraries, and after this it will try to process it, so it will take some time, but not a lot. Unfortunately, Angular projects are quite large. It's about 100 meg, even simple project. But when you compile it, when you build the package to upload to web, it will be small, because it will process it, optimize it, it will drop things that are not used. So it will be very reasonably small, not bigger than regular website with regular JavaScript in it. So it is downloading stuff, and just give it a minute. Okay, successfully initialized Git. You see? And it says successfully initialized Git, so if you go to Git, you will see it already committed initial commit. Initial commit. That contains tons of files already. So let's quickly browse through the stuff what we have. Oh, obviously, there are lots of files that are describing your project. Even simpler ones, there's a big one. There are a lot of description. This is settings for the project itself. Then package JSON is listing libraries used by your project. It is not a good idea to edit this file because there are options to edit from command line. So it's probably better do not touch it unless you really know what you do right now, okay? It is possible to edit from just typing things and it will edit it. If you look carefully, there is a source folder contains index.html. Index.html is already, you know, it is default address, right? Default address for HTML, JavaScript program or website. So this is kind of root of everything. And in most cases, we don't need to edit it. Why? When we open it, we will see that it is just a header, description for viewport. It's a typical for, say, yeah, you know, setup for HTML if you use some frameworks. A fav icon reference that you can replace it fav icon here, and it will replace icon in the corner of your app. And it is referring to root component inside of the body. So I already mentioned that when project is created, it's created with root component that takes all entire screen. So we have a body that is wrapping root component that takes everything inside of the body. Usually, we don't need to edit this file unless we want to include something global per project. And we will not do it in the beginning of the course. Okay? So for simple projects, we don't need to edit it for now. And there is also global script, main.cs, the same logic. We don't edit it for simple projects. And it is for global behavior. The same applies to global CSS file. Again, if you want to make some global styles, it goes to styles.css, but every component comes with own CSS file. So there is a folder for settings for IntelliJ IDEA and folder for settings for Visual Studio Code. So we're not using this one, but let's keep it, so don't delete it. Okay? So in source folder, there is a folder for assets, and this is the best place to put images. So, for example, create folder images, and images go there. There is no better place to put images. So it goes in assets. They go into assets. EPP, it is root of your app, and it contains component for entire piece. If you add additional components, they will be added as subfolder of this EPP folder. We will add it today, and you will see that it will create subfolders of it. So what do we have here? Module, it's for organization of your code. It is not part of this component. Okay? It looks like it's a part, but it's not. It is referring to this component and will refer to other components that you create. So let's look at these files. CSS, obviously CSS is associated with the component. In this case, it is empty. HTML, it's a layout of this component, and it is not valid HTML in terms of valid HTML file. Remember that component code is kind of inserted inside of index.html, right? It's not inserted. It's JavaScript is doing this work. But it's like a wrap around it. Index.html is like a wrap around it. So if we look it up, you will see that it's not starting with tag HTML, right? So it is starting with some other things. What is this part? It is some code that just a placeholder that you delete it, you make sure that it is working, project is running, after this you delete it. It's a demo code. Every empty Angular project is not really empty, it contains demo code in it. So what is this part? This file is for automatic testing. Let's ignore it for now till we learn how to deal with it. TS stands for TypeScript, and this is major file that links three pieces together. A name of the component elsewhere. If you put it inside component inside of component, this will be name of your component inside of that component. In this case, given component goes to index.html, and you saw app root there inside of index.html. Also, it links layout, HTML layout, and CSS, and code associated with these three pieces. So this is class associated with layout, CSS, and name. Okay. It is not regular. It's not regular class because it is marked with component and has this association. Please notice that this class has the word export in front of it. So it's a keyword of TypeScript. If you do not export class, you will not be able to access it from another file. So export feature, it's a way to avoid naming conflicts. It is not just for classes, it's also for functions, variables. If you declare something in a file and you don't export it, there is no way to access it. But even if you export it, it will not be visible by default. You need to import it explicitly. So for example, this class app component is exported outside of the file, but in order to see it in module, it is imported. You see, it is imported into module. Okay? So this happens in TypeScript by default. In order to make something visible elsewhere, you have to export it in one place and import it where you want to see it. All right? Going back to component CS. So what is this one? It is instance variable inside of the given class. There is no var or val in front of it. This is how you declare instance variable inside of a class. It is just a name. But since it's a TypeScript, you can specify type if you want. So if you want to be pedantic, I can just say, this is a string. This would be a way to specify type next to declared variable in TypeScript. A type goes after column, like in Kotlin, for example, in Pascal or some languages. In some languages, types after column, and it's one of those languages. And so title would be instance variable, and it will be public. So in TypeScript, everything is public by default. But if you want to limit it, if you want to make it not visible outside of the class, you can use keyword private. Okay? And if you create private, you can also create setters and getters. That makes it property like in C#. It's not popular in TypeScript. It's if you need to make something publicly accessible, it is just public. It's like in JavaScript. It is possible to wrap it with setters and getters, but typically it is just public. But in addition, since this is not regular class, it is component, public property in public value inside of a class is accessible inside of HTML. And it is observable. In sense, if you change value by assigning it, automatically HTML will be refreshed with new value in it. So it is how Angular behaves. If you declare instance variable inside of a component, and you refer to this inside of HTML. For example, you have a script that is assigning value to title. By just assigning value to title, Angular will refresh that piece of the screen displaying title. Okay. So this is how Angular behaves. In some other languages or frameworks, you need to browse tree, document tree, in order to refresh it, right? For example, when you do jQuery, in order to update the screen, you search for item in the tree and you set the value there, right? Not in Angular. You mention the name inside of the template, so this is template, you see? HTML template. And you assign new value to the variable, and template will be updated. Okay, questions? So let's see what is inside of HTML. It's kind of quite long code. They sticked CSS inside of HTML, so it's easier to delete. You delete it in one place. And at some point, this title is referenced inside of the code. If we scroll it, we will eventually find where it is. Here it is. Span, title, app is running. Okay. So this is how to insert expression inside of a body of some tag. So this is the tag span. And I want to insert some expression inside of the body. In this case, it's just variable name. It is a simple case of expression. So it could be any expression. If you type 2 plus 2, it will end up with 4 on the screen. Okay. So how to test project? Obviously, there is some code. It is for testing. So it works. How to test it? Easiest way, if you use IDE, is to click Run button. Okay. Another option is to open terminal and type ng space serve. But you will see if you click Run button, it will do exactly the same. You see, it goes ng space serve. It generates. By default, it will not open browser. It will give you link where it is running. So Angular runs on port 4200 by default. If you click on this link, it will open browser. And this is that code what you saw in HTML file. And this title is inserted. Okay. This page is linked to the code. It means when you edit the code, it will try to refresh the page according to your editing. And obviously, when you edit code, at some point, you may end up with broken code because you didn't finish typing. In this case, it will show errors. And if it gets stuck, you just need to refresh the page after you finish typing the code. Another option, if you anticipate a lot of editing, a lot of typing, just stop it from running. And when you're done with your code, run it again and see. Okay, this is what I do. If it is small editing, I don't stop it running. I will just edit the code. And if it looks like I need to do a lot, I will just stop it from running so it doesn't try to compile what is going on. And after this, so let's do some small edit. So I'm opening app component CS, and in hello, you see it is hello Angular without space, right? Hello Angular without space. So let's add space here. You see it's added space between hello Angular, between hello and Angular, right? Well, let's replace Angular with Sheridan. Replace it with Sheridan. So see, so it remains linked, but there are limits. If you try to change a lot, it may get confused and show error. So in this case, you stop it and run it again. And hopefully, it will help. Okay. So let's play with this code. Obviously, I want to delete this thing and type something from scratch, like elementary thing, to see how to deal with it. All right. So I want to stop it. And I will delete this piece. And let's create some hello Sheridan like on an empty page. Right? So I'm going to app component, going back to the top, app component HTML, going to the top, and where it says just delete it till the bottom. Okay, so I deleted it. Next, it's gone, so this will be empty. So let's add some, at least title like Hello Sheridan. Right? So I create H1 tag in the layout for the given component, enable insert a title. Okay, insert title. And please notice that it is trying, it will validate the code, right? If there is no variable like this, it shows in red, but you see? It knows that I have public variable title, so it is validating this, otherwise it is in red. So it is quite smart and helpful. So let's run it and see if it inserts it properly. Maybe I need to refresh. Yeah, refresh it. Hello, Sheridan. Let's add exclamation mark here with joining strings. Like hello, Sheridan with exclamation mark. Yeah, I got exclamation mark. Let's edit CSS to change color for H1. So I'm changing color for H1. H1 color. You see, it is helping a lot. Let's make it green. Got it green. Next, let's I have a header and going to HTML. Let's add main section, and in main section add something. I don't know what to add, so I will say something. Okay, something there. And let's see something. Now let's add footer, and let's make a footer as a separate component. So we know how to deal with more than one component now. So as I already mentioned, the easiest way to add things, because component is not one file, it is several files, it is easier just to type generate component. So I'm going to terminal, and I type ng space generate space component space. Now I need to give a name. When you create a component, you can, the best way actually is to say a name, like use small letters minus separated. Okay. If you use camel case with capital, it will also work. Outcome will be the same, actually. If you use camel case with capital, you need to end it with capital word component. But if you use small letters dash separated, it will be just file name, and it will generate name based component name based on that. So I will do like my footer. Why with my? Just to show how to separate words with dash. Okay, you click enter, and you wait. Okay, you see it created folder my footer. Unfortunately, it's not always refreshing the screen. So sometimes you need to fold it and unfold it to see difference. So if you don't see this folder immediately, close app and open that. It doesn't always react. Okay. So I got my footer. My footer now contains CSS, HTML, testing file, and TypeScript. So let's start with TypeScript. In the TypeScript file, it declares name, how to insert it into other components. So I will insert it into app root. Contains reference to layout and CSS. Okay. Constructor is empty, and this method will be call it after constructors injected with dependencies. So we will use it later when we start using dependency injection. So for now, let's leave it empty for now. So I'm going to HTML and see what it says. Some space holder as my footer works. So let's edit this. So instead of paragraph, I will probably use HTML tag, call it footer. HTML5 contains tag footer, so I'm using that. Let's put some meaningful name here for this footer, like Sheridan College, 2023. 2023. Now, in order to see it here, I need to insert footer into app component. So let's go to app component, a layout, and insert my footer there. App, my footer. Yes. Okay, I got a footer, but it's kind of stuck to text. So I need to maybe edit something about CSS here. For the tag, call it footer. Right? My footer contains tag footer, so wrapping it. So I'm adding CSS to that tag. So maybe margin top and maybe 1em and see if it is good enough. Yep. So it jumped down. So what else? Maybe color is different and font is different. So let's change color to something else, like color, dark cyan. Yeah, no, let's do blue. Oh, blue violet, nice color. Oh, blue violet. So let's make it slightly bigger, font size, larger. Okay. So we have a header, something in footer. All right. Now let's go here, and technically we can have a header as a separate component, right? Not part of main app. So let's repeat this exercise for the header. Create my header also. Okay? So let's do so. So repeating the exercise and creating my header. So I'm going to terminal. Here it is. And I'm repeating, instead of footer, this is header. So ng generate component my header. Okay. I press enter. And I got header. So this will go into layout, but now I need to move title into header, right? As well. Because title is public variable inside of app. It won't be visible inside of header. So I will need to move that one. So I say copy. This is the layout. Going to header, my header HTML, and I paste it there. Okay. You see, title is not recognized because title is in different class. I need to move it into header, right? Also, maybe I want to wrap it into some tag like header. Okay. Maybe to have some, I don't know, margins around of the header. Okay. Next, let's move title. I'm going to app component CS. Okay. And I move title, cut, into my header CS. Somewhere. Yeah, I can delete this thing. Oh. This is why. I deleted method, but this method is mentioned inside of interface, right? So I need to get rid of this interface. Because I deleted method, as I mentioned, as implemented interface. All right? Hello, Sheridan. Now, if I go to my header, HTML, now it is recognized. But you will see that something is wrong. Okay. Something is wrong, and this is how error happens, right? So property title does not exist on type app component. I deleted property app component, but I still have it inside of layout of app component, right? So let's go to app component. I copied this and I pasted elsewhere, but app component now doesn't have title. This is how arrows look like. Okay? So remember that I wanted to replace it with delete this thing, and I wanted to replace it with my header, right? Okay? Instead of coding is there. And you see HTML, CSS does not work. This is what I mean. CSS defined in one component does not apply into another one. CSS is defined for root, but it does not propagate inside of another component. It means I need to move that CSS as well. So you see color is wrong. So I need to go into app CSS, this color of H1, cut, and put this color into header, my header. So that was demo that CSS defined outside does not propagate inside of other components that you inserted. It's not a bug, it's a feature, it is designed in such a way, so we will do not introduce unintended effects around. So now it's 2 o'clock, so the 2:05, and this was end of the demo. Okay, so let's relax for 10 minutes, and after break, we will clone project from GitHub, and I will explain how that works.